He did a number of things. However, his contribution to the civil rights movement is so much deeper than what he did in Harrisburg. He was born in New York City, born free. His father had served in 2 wars, the War of 1812 and the Barbary Wars against North African pirates. But his father died when William Day was 3. His mother was involved in the AME Church, the founding of the AME Zion Church in New York City. But she gave him up for adoption when he was 12 years old, and William Day was adopted by a white family, a white business family from Northampton, Massachusetts. He moved there and went to a high school, only black student in his high school. Wanted to go to Williams College and wasn't enrolled because of his color, his race. So he ended up going to Oberlin College in Ohio, where he graduated in 1847, becoming the 3rd African-American to graduate from Oberlin. He gave the commencement address at his graduation. He stayed in Ohio, and at the young age of 25, he was asked by those involved in the civil rights movement to address the Ohio State Assembly to repeal that state's black codes, the phrase for ignore the discriminatory laws, which he did. You know, and at age 25, that's almost the same age when Dr. King was asked to lead the boycott in Montgomery when he was 26. You know, which William Day did. And he walked up to the rostrum without a shake in his hand and challenged those legislators, and they ultimately repealed Ohio State's black codes. At the same time, he became president or chairman of the Underground Railroad Vigilance Committee in that state. And he served as the Underground Railroad president of Ohio until 1855, where he and his family decided to move to Canada, where in Canada he does 2 significant things, apart from working as a teacher on refugee slave settlements in an area called Chatham, in what is today the province of Ontario. Back then it was called Canada West. He both worked as the chairman of the Underground Railroad in Chatham, and also had a chance meeting with John Brown, the famous white abolitionist who tried to attack Harper's Ferry. John Brown was in Chatham in 1858 looking to recruit soldiers. He actually had help from Harry Tubman. Harry Tubman had befriended William Day. So the 3 actually worked together, Tubman to recruit soldiers. And John Brown asked William Howard Day to print his Constitution of his slave-free United States of America. And he paid him about $30 to do it. And for 20-some days, William Day worked in a small makeshift printing office, and he printed off a number of constitutions. We don't know the exact number, but 2 of them still exist. One is sitting at the Charlestown Historical Society outside of Harper's Ferry, and the other is in the Kansas Historical Society. But he printed the constitutions, had them shipped to John Brown's men, and then took off to Great Britain for the duration of the war. Had some concerns about being indicted, along with many others who were indicted with John Brown, but never was. William Howard Day never spoke about his experience and his meetings with John Brown until the late 1880s. You know, the first recorded time that William Day spoke about it was 1887, and it showed up in a Chambersburg newspaper. But this is the thing I want to focus on, what you have your handout for. You know, I would like to present a new definition for you about the Underground Railroad. If you guys can take a look. If anyone doesn't have a handout, let us know. We'll have some people come around and give you them when they're up here on the table. There's a significant number. It's 2-sided. I ask you to turn to the side that has the documents on it. And what I want to do is take a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes, and present to you a new definition of the Underground Railroad. I'm hoping it's something different for you. Okay, I'm not going to call this so much, you know, a novel approach or revisionist, but this is a new perspective. And I want to make the Underground Railroad look to you as a political movement, which in my opinion it was. So let me read the definition here. And by the way, I do teach, and if anyone wants to interrupt me at any point with a question, do that, but just understand if you do that, Dean Sealing, I may go past the time. So we'll all keep that in mind. But nevertheless, we'll take a look at the document. The Underground Railroad, 1831 to 61, was a very public and organized movement by abolitionists. The significance of the Underground is not found by searching for cubby holes, tunnels, and passageways, but rather the term is more metaphorical, as black abolitionists used newspapers, letters, and demonstrations to agitate the South about slave escapes. Okay, now, if you look at the first sentence, there should be a word or two that sticks out at you. In this group, does anyone want to point out something? Take a look at the first line. You know, with a large group, I don't know how much back and forth we can give, but we can give it a shot. Yes, very good. Someone in the back said the word public, and that's it. You know, and that's my argument. The Underground Railroad was very public. It was very much out in the open. You know, for us to look at it, in my view, you have to stamp it with both a time and a place and then a behavior. So you have 1831 to 61. I directly give dates of when the Underground was in operation. Yes, there were slaves escaping before 1831, but in an organized political manner, I'm arguing that it wasn't. You know, why do I choose the year 1831? Well, you know, I think first because of the simple fact that railroads were just being introduced to our country. You know, we first experienced railroads in the 1820s, but people, they weren't familiar with it. In some cases, intimidated by a train. So people just started to use the word railroad in the 30s. So how can you say the Underground Railroad if, in fact, people didn't know what a railroad was? So that's why I stand with a starting point. Place. 70% of all railroad tracks were laid in the north. So it was a northern operation. Both the physical and metaphorical components of a railroad. The Underground Railroad was a northern operation, that's what I'm contending. So who coins it? Abolitionists working in the 1830s who coined the phrase Underground Railroad. I provided you with a document to try to support my, and I think you guys can appreciate that, this being a law school, with my evidence for my argument here. The first source here comes from the Boston Liberator. The publication date is 1842. And it reads, Sam Weller. Now, Sam Weller is a character in one of Charles Dickens' books called The Pickwick Papers. It was published in 1836, this time period. Sam Weller was requested to tell the slaveholders that we passed 26 prime slaves to the land of freedom last week, and several more this week thus far. Don't know what the end of the week will foot up, but all went by the Underground Railroad. Now, this is the first known document that we found that mentions the phrase Underground Railroad. Okay, so not only the simple fact that, you know, there wasn't a railroad we could talk about before the 1830s, you know, but also what document could you see when people actually started to use the phrase? And this is the first one we found, 1842. You know, typically many people think the Underground Railroad starts with the story of a slave escaping from Kentucky named Tice Davis crossing over the Ohio River into Ohio. And with a slave catcher chasing after him, people overheard him say, my runaway must have escaped by some underground railway. You know, so that's the myth. Okay, who knows where that story comes from? Okay, but the reality is this, and what makes it a political movement is law has everything to do with it. You know, and I think we can trace the roots as far back as 1780 in the state of Pennsylvania, when Pennsylvania passed the Gradual Abolition Law of 1780. The Gradual Abolition Law, in short, stated that those who were born after March 1st of 1780, upon their 28th birthday, will be set free. Now, unfortunately for those who were alive and living before March of 1780, they were kept in slavery for life unless a slave owner willingly manumitted them or even worse, sent them into the South, sold them to the South. But those born after. So in the state of Pennsylvania, what you'll see is after 30 years or so, by 1810, 1815, 1820, you're seeing free black communities in the state of Pennsylvania and all over the north, because other northern states followed what Pennsylvania did over a gradual time. You see free black communities developing in places like Harrisburg, which on the eve of the Civil War had the largest, next to Philadelphia, the largest African-American community in the state. Columbia had a significant, you know, we're talking Harrisburg and Columbia, Pennsylvania had about 900 free blacks living there. So now that you have free black communities emerging by 1810, 1820, you know, there's going to be a fight between whites and blacks. Just because someone may have been against slavery doesn't mean that they weren't still racist and didn't want blacks to have full or equal rights, full equality. So what you see then is by 1820, certain laws or ordinances being passed locally, forcing free blacks to register their names and addresses with a local magistrate. You see the formation of colonization societies, which was ultimately a white American movement to convince free blacks to relocate to certain parts of Africa. In this case, in this time period, namely Liberia. But also Pennsylvania's constitution changes. In terms of writing the Constitution in our state, we've written our Constitution about 6 or 7 times. But the state constitution, as written in 1790, gave all free men, no matter of race, it gave all free men, the right to vote, amongst many other rights. And there weren't many free blacks living in the state at the time. But again, as the free black population increased significantly, a constitution